Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. I'm Mark Stein, Thrive founder and your podcast host. We're creating sustainable, inclusive, and multi-generational residential communities. Our mission is to combat the epidemic of isolation, revitalize communities, and help others discover the many benefits of engaged community living by offering unique and ecologically sustainable co-living options. In this podcast series, join us as we discuss co-living, in addition to bringing you interesting people from around the world who are doing cool things to expand your knowledge and satisfy your curiosity. Through this podcast, learn more about our concept and see how Thrive co-living communities will bring together people from all walks of life who want to enjoy the best of independent and group living. To find out more about us, please visit our website at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. Thanks for watching and enjoy the podcast. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Thrive Co-Living Communities podcast, Quail Forest edition. I'm your host, Mark Stein, and today I'm excited to welcome my guest, Chris Curran. He's a realtor based in the Tampa Bay area. He began his real estate career in 2016 with a focus on institutional acquisitions of scattered site single-family homes for a large Wall Street hedge fund. With experience in underwriting and analyzing over 4,000 cash flowing properties, Chris continues to be an asset to many investors with rental properties, multifamily opportunities, as well as short-term flips. Chris is also an active member of the top producing Paul DeSantis group, where he leverages his knowledge and expertise with the team's luxury customers. So welcome, Chris. Glad to have you on the Thrive Co-Living and Thrive Quail Forest Communities podcast.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to whatever we're going to discuss.
All right, well, let's get started. One of the things that I'm always interested in is passions that lead people to do what they do. Without going into details of your background, talk about what sparked your passion about real estate at the beginning and what continues to fuel that passion.
Yeah, so growing up, I always thought it was cool that somebody owned everything, more or less, right? You drive by the gas station, someone owns that. There's a church, someone owns that. There's an office building, someone owns that. There's a house, someone owns that. So I've always liked the idea of someone owns it, and then how do they own it? What type of money did they have to own it? What type of wealth are they building to own it? What type of cash flow? I didn't learn about cash flow until much later, right? But the idea, the concept of owning real estate was always interesting to me. And growing up in Pinellas County, we've got this little county, right? And there's not a lot of land to build on. So I just found it real interesting that you have to utilize the small piece of land that we do have to the highest and best use. And I'm still learning that. There's a lot that goes into it, right? But it's really interested me as a young kid. I remember in middle school, high school, it's like, oh, that's interesting. And then not till almost 25 years later did I actually get into the industry. But that's kind of how it first started.
Well, let's start broadly. No. Let's start narrow and build out. And I'm in a villa community. I get corrected by my neighbors all the time, not condos, in northern Pinellas County, and it's called Quail Forest. It's in the East Lake Woodlands area, which encompasses dozens of different communities. And we're in a network, full disclosure, he and I are in a networking group together. And I had just moved into our villa and invited him to come and take a look at the area. So for our Quail Forest residents and Thrive Quail Forest members who will be watching this podcast, talk a little bit about your impressions of the community, what makes it unique, And really from the perspective, potential sales perspective, or even rental perspective, um, there's a realtor that sends postcards out when they've got one to sell in this community. And we went and looked at, or were going to look at one that we got a postcard on, and it had closed or was pending closure within less than a week.
Hmm.
So talk about this community, and then we'll broaden out to talk about Tampa Bay, the hurricanes, um, insurance rates, and talk about the whole state so that our out of town listeners who might be thinking about moving to this area will have some perspectives from you on that. So long-winded on the front end, but I'm going to turn it over to you. Start
Yeah.
micro and
So
then let's build out.
no, for sure. So it's been probably 8 months or so since I went to the community. And the first thing I liked that it was gated. I like everything seemed like it was very well manicured, which is like the very first thing that you see, right? First impressions are always the best. So came in, everything was manicured. The roofs all looked like they were in good shape. That's another thing as an agent when I'm going to any neighborhood, you notice lawns, and then the next thing I look at is garage doors. But then the third thing I look at is roofs. So I kind of go from the ground, the garage doors, which is like people call the garage door like a smile of the home, and then up to the roofs because it shows pride of ownership. If you don't have if you don't have like missing shingles, tarps, kind of weird things going on with the roofs, and they're like all been replaced recently, you can tell like it's a community where people have a lot of pride, right? So that's like where the very first couple things that I look into, as well as some buyers. I mean, that's what they're going to look into as well. They're going to see, is it overgrown grass? If you had a garage door, is it all beat up? Is it rusted? Is it kind of falling off the hinges a little bit? And then roofs, like, oh, this looks like a new roof, good condition. So when I came into the community, I definitely got the impression there's a lot of pride of ownership in the community. And then your unit was the only one that I walked. I liked how it had like the vaulted ceiling. Showed very well. It's nice, wide open space. The layout was very functional with the split floor plan, and then overlooking the lake. I'm not sure if all the let me look real quick. If all the units have a lake view, it looks like 90% of them do. Maybe, yeah, a good portion of them do have lake views, which is always a good feature to have. That way, you're looking at maybe some ducks out there, some other turtles, whatnot, maybe some alligators. People don't like that, but
Yep.
we're in Florida, so
Yep.
it does happen occasionally. But to see nature is always fun too. So those were like the very first couple things that I thought of. When I was coming to that community a while back.
And we've just replaced, we're going into the last phase to replace the remaining roofs. So they're all new roofs.
Nice.
Um, and there was something else you mentioned. Yeah, there are some lake views and there's some that back up to a preserve of some sort that'll stay green space,
Which
forever.
is nice. Yeah, it's good to have that green space in your backyard because then no one's gonna build back there, making a bunch of ruckus. So a little privacy. So that's nice.
Yeah. And one thing I appreciate is that they're all one story. So they're
Hmm.
not, condos on top of each other with neighbors there. Um, but they are staggered. They're not in a line. They're staggered because of the lake,
Hmm.
to be around the lake. So you always have an unobstructed, or you're not seeing your neighbor right
Yeah.
outside your back door. They are attached.
Yeah.
Um, they seem to sell pretty quickly. They were built in the early 80s, but one thing I really appreciate is that the HOA evidently for many years have been good stewards of the money. We had a $2,000 assessment for new roofs, and I'm hearing 6, 10, and that's per unit, with some others, and lots of reserve funds for road, roof, um, other maintenance and they seem to refresh the landscaping, as we lose trees in the hurricane, that sort of thing. So, any other observations about just this community, location, etc.?
Yeah, like you mentioned, it's in a really great location, centrally located, so you can get to both Pinellas and Hillsborough County really easily because you're right there in that Oldsmar area. And East Lake has been known for a while to be very desirable. There's a bunch of golf courses up there, Landsbrook. There's quite a few that are just right around the corner in that area. So it's been known for years and years, but a really great location. It's even pretty close. You can get to Clearwater Beach fairly easily as well, which is still ranked one of the top beaches in America. And then you also mentioned things in the community tend to sell pretty quickly. I just did a quick research on average, things are selling about 45 days in the community. Going back a year, 365 days. Obviously, there's always some nuance to that, right? If there's property in a dated condition, a little older condition, it's going to sit on the market for a little bit longer. But if it's been updated, it tends to go pretty quickly. That one that you mentioned was on the market for only 6 days until it accepted a contract. So you're definitely seeing some movement if you price it correctly and have a really good condition. So when people are buying real estate, they really look at 3 to maybe 4 things. First thing is price. Second thing is usually location. Third thing is condition. Maybe not in that order. Maybe location is the first one, right, for most people. But so if you can, we try to use those 3 as a good guiding point. Location, usually that's what people want. They want to be in a certain location. They're not changing their mind on that. And then price condition can always fluctuate.
And this last one that just sold, she said they got their asking price, and it was about 10, 20% higher than we bought 2 years ago, or a little over 2 years ago.
So that's great news for you.
Yeah.
As well as the other residents that had bought to that same time and previous. So it's been great to see the appreciation we've seen in the Tampa Bay area since 2020. We've seen quite a bit.
We're also real close to shopping, Target, Publix, Walmart, Market, but
So Countryside Mall.
it feels insulated. Occasionally, I hear some road noise because I'm pretty close to East Lake, but it feels pretty insulated and remote, especially if you're out looking over the lake. So,
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
okay, well, thanks for your feedback on that, and I'm sure the local residents will be interested in that part of it. So let's broaden out to Tampa Bay, Pinellas, and Pinellas. Am I correct? That's the most densely populated county in the state. Is that right?
That's tough because I mean we're small. We're a really small county land-wise, so it might be accurate. I know like Miami-Dade is pretty densely populated as well, so I'd see a toss-up between the two. I don't want to say it is, but I don't want to say it's not. So maybe I bet those are like probably 1 and 2. But I think we might be a little bit more only because our size. Like Dade County is a little bit bigger. Pinellas County is pretty small, but we are densely populated. Hillsborough County is interesting enough to know has one of the most one of the more what do you call it? One of the most high schools in the area because it's such a large area, and and Hillsborough is also pretty spread out. And I think between the 2 counties, or even maybe including Pasco, we might be close to like 2 million people in the area. That actually might include a little bit of Sarasota, Manatee, because the greater Tampa Bay area kind of includes that. Some people don't like to include Sarasota, Manatee, but it's still in there.
Yeah. So let's start with the neighborhoods and areas that you focus on most as a realtor, and the ones that you're most familiar with. And I don't know, just talk us through sort of the state of real estate in Tampa Bay.
Yeah, so it's real interesting. Real estate is hyper localized, but it's also broad in the same regard, right? So within Pinellas County, there's like probably 17 to 20 different submarkets, maybe more. I mean, you talk about certain condominium buildings, and then Hillsborough County is even much bigger. So it's really very localized. I live over in Tampa, so I kind of focus in the South Tampa area, which is south of 275, pretty much down to McDill Air Force Base is our general focus. We do a lot of stuff downtown Tampa, condos as well, but I'm a part of a team. There's 7 of us, and we actually have a very, very large reach. Some of us live in Tampa, some live in Pinellas County, some live down in Waimama, some live down in Sarasota, in Parish. So there's a lot of reach. So we're able to kind of have a lot of insights on these different markets. Also, I don't mind driving. A lot of people in Pinellas County, they don't like driving across the bridges for some reason. They're like kryptonite to people. I don't get it. But I grew up in Pinellas County, so for me, driving across the bridge is not a big deal. And sometimes I can get to St. Pete quicker than Tampa, depending on the time of day as well. So, but generally, we're all over the place, to be honest. It takes us, I would say, anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes to get to most places in the area, which is really not that bad because I can hop on either interstate or certain roads and listen to a podcast while I have some windshield time. So trying to take advantage of those opportunities. So we do quite a bit actually up in Wesley Chapel, Epperson area where that lagoon is. We do a lot of business up there. We've had the 2 record sales up there, 1.5 and 1.6 million. And so we do a lot of business up there on the luxury side. And then South Tampa, Bayshore Boulevard, we just put one under contract, right? Like 2 houses off of Bayshore Boulevard for around 3 million. So Davis Island, we do some stuff in Davis Island. We closed one in the low 3s. So we're all over the place, but also I've closed townhouses in Pinellas County for 175,000 last year. So while I'm with a luxury broker, Premier Sotheby's International Realty, we service all price points. And one of our slogans is luxury is an experience, not just a price point. So we really try to cater to everyone and have exceptional customer service.
So what's the appeal? I know what it is for me, but for people that might be interested in moving into the area, what's the appeal to Tampa Bay, in your opinion?
We're like a melting pot. There's a lot of people from up north that come down to Tampa, St. Pete area, which brings a lot of culture, a lot of art, a lot of great food, a lot of great activities. And with that, it just brings a fun nature, right? There's so many great restaurants in the area. We have great temperatures year round. So there's a lot of businesses like that have headquarters here. So a lot of job opportunities, a lot of hospitality has been increasing recently. We have a big healthcare industry as well. So there's a lot of really great things. The beaches, like I mentioned, Clearwater Beach being one of the top beaches, always recognized. Sunset Beach, you have Treasure Island, Paso Grill, like all these beaches up and down the coast are just really wonderful to go to. And it's easy to get to, if you want to do some deep sea fishing, it's easy to get on a boat going down John's Pass or something, or Clearwater Beach. You can go deep sea fishing, a lot of trails. It's kind of crazy. Most people wouldn't know this, but Florida has some of the best mountain biking trails around because we have there's quarries that are around. And in order to what they partnered up with some of the states, some of the government, where they have to build, make it like a green space for people, and they build these really cool dirt bike trails out of these old quarries. So they have some really cool rides that they can do. So most people don't know that, but Florida is known for that. In that community, I'm not in that community, but I've heard a lot about it. So there's a lot of art here, a lot of music here. Comedians come here all the time. We have 3 sports teams. Not many cities have 3 professional sport teams between the Bucks, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and the Rays. So there's just a lot going on. Our employment rate is our unemployment is pretty low, all things considered, which there's a lot of opportunities for jobs, and we're growing. So that just attracts a lot of people.
Yeah, I'll add a couple things to the list. I went to my first spring training game, the Yankees, and I think there are 4 teams right in this area that have their spring training here. I don't remember them all. I'm not a huge baseball fan, but that was fun. And up in the northern, a little further north from us, in Pasco and maybe one more north, are a lot of spring-fed rivers for kayaking. My favorite is Weeki Wachee, and they're famous for their mermaid show, which I haven't seen. But how many how many 1950s mermaid shows are there still in existence? But anyway,
Not many.
the water is so clear, it's so beautiful. There are
Hmm.
manatees in the wintertime, um, and I just love it. Uh, you can see all the way to the bottom until you get to the mouth, of where it ends up and empties into a larger body.
Hmm.
Just crystal clear and cool year round. So
Yeah. The springs are a lot of fun if you like doing some fishing, like just going on the kayak, and it's a lot of fun. What you watch is beautiful up there. The water is 72 degrees year round, so it's a little chilly. But in the summertime, it's very refreshing.
did you say 72?
Yeah.
Gosh, it feels colder than that, but
Well, yeah.
so when you've got a new buyer, and let's say they're coming in from out of town,
Hmm.
obviously you do your due diligence and you're finding out what they want. But what's what's common? Oh, we also have a big senior community down here,
Hmm.
so a lot of 55 and over. Um, Pick a prototypical family or couple that's looking for something and sort of talk our way. I know it's hard in general because everybody's different, but
Yeah.
sort of talk us through how you would approach it in a typical situation and what people are typically looking for.
Yeah, so usually the first thing I do is I send them a step-by-step home buyer's guide. While every market is a little bit different, generally these are like the outline of what you're going to expect. Where you're buying a house either with me or someone else, this is generally the how it's going to look. You're looking at properties, making offers, inspection periods, what our contract kind of has in it versus some other states have different things. So that's usually the first thing I do is send them, well, after the initial conversation just to give them an idea what to expect, and then also what to expect working with me. Now, it really depends on where they're coming from. Are they coming from like New York City, or are they coming from a rural area? Because there's some people in the city want to be in the city where everything's walkable, and we only have a few areas that are walkable, right? Your downtown, your two downtowns, downtown St. Pete, downtown Tampa are your big walkable areas. But then also like Dunedin's got a walkable area. Safety Harbor's got a little walkable area. So there are all these little pockets there are a little bit more walkable. One thing people don't realize when they get down here is our public transportation system is not the greatest. So if you're used to public transportation, we don't have a good system here yet. There's always talks of how to improve that. So like people have to drive most places, and some people aren't comfortable with that because they're not used to it if they're coming from a Chicago or something like that where they don't have to, right? So trying to understand what they're looking for. They want more urban or a little more suburban. If someone's like a golfer, hey, we should look in the West Chase area or up in Lutz, by Cheval or Odessa, and get a little bit more around some other golf courses, or even down in Sarasota. There's a million golf courses down there. They're really just trying to see like what they're interested in. If they're interested in the arts, let's go like the St. Pete area. So like he's really trying to figure out what they're interested in, and then couple that with what their budget is. That's usually the big question is to like, what's the budget? So that also will determine a little bit of where we look and try to marry the two of lifestyle and budget together.
Hmm. Um, we had two hurricanes this past fall, back to back. Um, Talk about the damage, where the damage was, what the result has been, and how it's affected the market.
Yeah, so having two hurricanes within, I think, like 10 days of each other was pretty wild for us. It's very uncommon. And both of them, how they came up and around the state, is also very uncommon. Typically, Florida does have hurricanes, but they usually, for our area, they come across the state. And by the time they get to us, have dissipated quite a bit. So this year was definitely an anomaly. We're hoping, and I think it's true, it's the once every 100-year storm type situation that we had with Helene and Milton for that matter, how it came up and around and it kind of slingshot to us. But most of the damage was flood damage, and that was along the coastline. that was where we saw the significant amount of damage. So St. Pete and Hillsborough County are older cities. People don't realize or forget most of the houses were built in 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, all on slab, on grade, and small ranch houses haven't been touched in 50, 70 years and haven't had any issues. And they were built like that in like the intercoastal area along the beaches. And this year, some of those I talked to a guy a couple of days ago, 32 inches of water inside his house, which is, it's devastating. It really is devastating. But what happens to the market is people are trying to figure out what to do with that. Do you rebuild, or do you tear down and rebuild? Do you just refurbish it, or you just, cut your losses, collect the FEMA check, and then move on and sell the property for as is land value and move on? What we've seen that a lot of people have just sold it as is to get land value, and then move on and go on and do something a little bit different with kind of where they want to live. We're seeing non-flood zone properties be a lot more attractive, attractable. So I think there's been some appreciation in some of those markets a little further inland because of that. And I think there's been some depreciation or loss of value on the ones that have been flooded. I'll give you an example. A house that I was going to list last year was probably worth 800s roughly. After the storm, we ended up selling it for 600,000. So I lost 200 grand of value overnight, pretty much. And I know there's other people that have lost probably a million plus, depending on the situation, right? It's been really devastating not only do you lose like all your house, all your belongings that you've had in the house for 20, 30 years. It's very heartbreaking to see. But the encouraging part is not many lives were lost, so which is really important to kind of focus on, just because we have a lot of notice of it. The good thing about hurricanes is a week in advance, like, hey, this thing's coming, so you can kind of prepare. But do I think the market will rebound? I do. In 2004, we had a bunch of hurricanes come through our area as well, and the prices did kind of dip initially, but over time they rebounded even more significantly. So I think that will happen again. It will take a little bit longer this go around just because it was pretty devastating. But yeah, and it will improve, but it'll take a little bit more time. I don't know what that looks like. Is that 12 months, 18 months, 24? It's speculation right now, but I do anticipate us rebounding for sure.
And I think this was the first direct hit. The second one was the first direct hit in 100 years. I don't know.
100 years. That's how Johns Pass was formed about 100 and so years ago. Hurricane Katrina came up through and formed Johns Pass. So we know that it's happened before, but it was 100 years ago. So that's why we're thinking we're on the bad side of the 100-year storm. But yeah, so it can happen. It's very rare though.
And we were fortunate with that one that it hit, let's see, it was south of Tampa Bay. If it had gone to the north, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong on my recollection, it would have pushed water into Tampa Bay, and instead the prevailing winds of the hurricane pushed it out of Tampa Bay, relieving the central city of Tampa Bay, not nearly as flooded as it would have been.
Exactly. You want to be on the west side, north, you want to be on the west side of the storm, because that's where like the wind is pushing it away and pushing water out. So we did get spared there. If we were on the south side / east side, it would have been a different story for the Bay for sure.
Do you know the tale about Safety Harbor? As it supposedly it looks like not, that there are some Indian mounds or were, and that something about this sacred space in Safety Harbor makes the hurricanes go in one direction or the other from Tampa Bay, except this time.
Yeah, I don't know if it was Safety Harbor. It might be Safety Harbor, but it might also be like the Sarasota area as well. there might be a couple Indian burial grounds that are kind of protecting us. I don't know. It's it's just fun to kind of speculate on that. But yes, I have heard that.
Just some interesting local lore.
Yeah.
And because they go one way or another from Tampa Bay, I've been in the area about 4 or 5 years, but I hear stories and a couple of them earlier where people will evacuate north and central part of the state, and invariably they end up it'll miss Tampa Bay and hit Jacksonville,
Yep.
and go up and and they evacuate only to get hit worse than if they had stayed home.
Oh yeah, I've heard many stories like that. Oh, let's go to Orlando, and then Orlando gets hit. So it's like it's tough to know, but you just gotta do what you think is best for you and your family and stay safe. Is what you have to do. And getting away from the wind obviously is dangerous, but the water is the worst part, right? Is the rising waters. You can't do anything about that. You can't do anything about the wind either, but just trying to limit exposure as much as possible is the name of the game when it comes to hurricanes. Yeah.
Speaking of the flooding, we got flood insurance, and actually we're close to a flood zone, but uh, not in it. Um, what do you tell people about flood insurance um, when somebody's buying a home in the area?
So if you're getting a loan, you have to have flood insurance if it's in a flood zone. If it's an AE, an A, a B flood zone, you have to have insurance, a flood insurance for that. The lender requires it. Um, if you have citizens home insurance coming up in 2027, flood zone or not, you have to have a flood policy. It might be a little bit cost effective, 300 to 700 bucks, but they're all citizens insurers will be required to have flood insurance coming up soon. What do I say? Based historically, I would say if you're not close to one, a flood zone, because you can look at FEMA's map and see if you're close or not. If you're not close to one, I would recommend you don't need it. That's what I would tell people historically. After going through what we just went through, I'm almost inclined to tell you, my recommendation is get a flood policy. You never know what could happen. Maybe you're not near a flood zone, but there's a lake over there and it might overflow, or you might have a combination of some things that a dam might break and put water somewhere you're not expecting it to. So I'm almost inclined to tell people my recommendation is to get a flood policy just for protection. If it's 700 bucks a year, I can guarantee you, if the house floods, that's the best $700 you ever spent in your life. So like, you want to be protected there. If you're in a position where you can self-insure, that's great, but most people aren't in that position. So, and the challenging part with flood insurance is it varies, right? It's not just $5,000 or $2,000. It varies depending on location, elevation of the property, age of the house, location to the bay or the water. So it could be like personally, we pay I think 1650 per year in flood insurance. But I know people like on the water themselves, they pay 5 to 7 thousand per year, but they're directly on the water, small house that's sitting on slab. If you have a newer build that's been built up to 11-foot code, your insurance might be, even though you're right on the water, it might be 1,200 bucks for the year. So being built up to that level where code is actually very valuable too. And everything that was built to code and up to the 11-foot mark didn't have any issues except for water in the garages, but like nothing to their house had any issues. So it's proved that they actually kind of do know what they're talking about, even though it adds a big expense on the build process. But it's definitely valuable to be that elevated.
And speaking of insurance, that's one of the things that does deter some people or sends people back up north is the insurance rates, a combination of homeowners and flood if they
Yeah.
have that. Talk a little bit about that. And I think, yeah, just talk a little about increase in rates. And do you think there's any relief? There are not many people, not many companies insuring in the area. Citizens is a big one. I think a cooperative. Uh, Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, the flood insurance is it is tough because to your point, when you do have an issue, you have big, large payouts, and some of these insurance then become insolvent, right? So it can be a little bit of a challenge. So the good part is it's usually FEMA backed, so it's federally government backed. So you can always get flood insurance. Some of the challenges, though, I think 2 years ago we saw them totally redo how they were going to underwrite flood insurance. They called it Flood 2.0, and they totally revamped how they were doing it, and with the idea of spreading it across everybody. So maybe 5 years ago you paid a little amount, but now you pay much more. That's because they're trying to even it out. The the challenge though is it's very nuanced. you know. And I think last year or 2 years ago, we saw a significant increase in flood insurance policies, like 20%, which is pretty significant. And unfortunately, I would anticipate another increase coming in the next couple of years, just due to the amount of damage that we saw at a state level. But another thing that in talking about insurance, I think about is car insurance. So a lot of these cars also got flooded, which is going to increase premiums, is going to increase that as well. So Florida has some of the higher insurance rates, not only on homeowners, but also automobile, which, if you're coming from a state, New York City, for example, you're not used to driving a car. Now you have a car payment and car insurance payment that adds to that cost of living that you might not be expecting. That's usually the one thing that people often not forget about, but just don't think about, is not only you have homeowners insurance, but the automobile insurance in Tampa, not Tampa, but Florida in general, is some of the highest in the nation, unfortunately.
Well, and as I'm out on the roads and I try to stay off as much as I can, they drive crazy here.
Yeah.
Um, People uh, cutting you off and racing, and I don't know if it's accurate or just my perception, but I felt like it got worse around COVID, and maybe just because people were pissed off generally, and
I think
glad to
it's
get out or something.
Yeah, it might be a combination of that and all the massive influx of people moving to the area just caused a lot more ruckus, and they brought all their bad habits down here. So I'm gonna blame it on them, not us locals, right? A little facetious, but yeah, I mean, with the influx of people that we saw here, some of the bridges, like one of the crosstown connector, for example, they weren't expecting to see the traffic we have today until like 2030, right? But we had a massive influx of people moving down here during the COVID time, which our infrastructure wasn't prepared for, because how could you be prepared for something like that, right? So it's been a little bit challenging, and right now it's our popular time of year because it's gorgeous out. We're in March 11th, and it's blue skies and 70 degrees out there, so it's hard to beat it. Which is why a lot of people like being down here. Your snowbirds are down here right now, just enjoying this weather.
Talk a little bit about demand, um, inventory, maybe take us through COVID to today. I don't know, however you'd like to sort of summarize it.
Yeah. So in COVID, we probably had, I'll just use numbers so you can get an idea of it. In COVID, like the peak of it, we probably had 1,000 properties for sale in Hillsborough County, which sounds like a lot, but of a county of close to 1 million, it's not a lot. So, 700,000 people, 1,000 homes is not a lot, right? And those single family homes, not including townhouses or condos. But so those single family homes in 2021, and today we are back to our 2019 levels. So we're about 3,300 single family homes for sale, which honestly is a healthy market. 1,000 homes or 1,200 homes in 21 is not healthy. You couldn't even like blink and write an offer, and someone already beat you to it, right? Very unhealthy. Appreciation went through the roof. We saw almost 50% appreciation from 2020 to 2022, which normal appreciation is like 4%, 5%, right? Year over year, which is healthy. But when you see 10%, almost every month. Like you can't, it's not sustainable. Do I think we were undervalued at a macro level? I do, because again, the beaches, we have world-class beaches, and to be like, I grew up in the Largo area, so to find a house 3 miles from the beach for 300 grand, if you go to any other market that has a world-class beach, that you shouldn't be able to find that. So I think we were a hidden gem, but now, I'm going to blame some of the sports teams that kept winning all the championships. They put a big spotlight on us. So people wanted to move down here, which caused the appreciation, which is great if you've been here for a long time and you built that wealth, that home equity over the course of time. But I think that now we're in a healthier state. I think sellers might not like the fact that there's more inventory on the market, because now their buyers have more options. When buyers have options, they're indecisive. When they're indecisive, they take their time, and property tends to sit on the market for a little bit longer. In Hillsborough and Pinellas County, we're seeing average days about 45 days on market, between 40, 45, and that's pretty healthy. But sellers don't like that because it's longer on the market. But that's just part of it. Buyers, on the other hand, have great negotiations ability. They can ask for price reductions. They can get credit at closing. There's a lot of things that you can kind of work in your favor. If you're looking for an investment property, it might be a good opportunity now as well, because maybe a seller just really needs to sell. They might take a lower offer, 25, 30% off their asking price, just because they need to move to the next state or figure out what they're going to do, right? So I think there's still opportunity on both sides. I think if you price your house correctly, and in today's market, I would not push the pace. I would not try to go above and beyond what's currently selling on the market as far as values. But if you're at market value, if everything's selling for around 300, it's a nuanced approach, but if everything's selling for around 300, I would say be around the 300 mark. Now the nuance is, what if you updated it immensely, and you've done such a great job updating, it doesn't look like anything else, then yeah, let's push the pace a little bit on it. But if it's a little bit dated and you're still selling it, I would be around the $300,000, just using that as an example. Pricing in today's market is crucial, and pricing it correctly is vital. And so to help limit days on market. But I think that Tampa Bay area has a good, healthy approach, not approach, but market that we're seeing right now. Data would suggest we're in a seller's market. Boots on ground tells us that we're more of a buyer's market, just from our day-to-day activities that we're seeing.
Around the time of COVID, when the interest rates shot up, a lot of people that had been in their homes for a while and had 2 to 3% rates felt like they had to stay put, because they were going to end, if they bought anywhere else or here still, they were going to be paying 7.5. Has that phenomenon, so that put a damper on the inventory. Has that phenomenon lifted? I mean, rates are what are average rates now in the fives?
I'm representing the seller, and the buyer just locked in a rate at 6.25. So now there's some nuance to that. She's putting 20% down. She's got a great credit score. Her debt to income is solid, so she's less risky. But 6.25 is not terrible, where literally the beginning of the year / end of 24, they were in the sevens, maybe even 7.25, depending on some certain variables. I think on average right now we're mid to high sevens. Interest rates are always a tough one, because there's so much that goes into it: credit score, your debt to income, stuff like that. So how much are you putting down, cash reserves? So it's not just a blanket statement, right? But has it lifted? I think we're not quite there yet. Close. I think if there's a 5 in front of the number of interest rates, then things will loosen up, because most home sellers are going to be home buyers generally, and they want to go from a 3% to not a 6%, not a 6%. If there's a 5 in front of it, I would not be surprised if we see some more movement. But at the end of the day, people still need housing. People still want to downsize if they need to, or maybe they just got pregnant. Now they need to find something that's, bigger. So there's always these life things that happen that require people to move. That will never change. It's just at what pace.
And the rental market is brutal. We
Tough.
were in it for just a short period of time with increases and just the unpleasantness of renting from somebody else. Um,
Yeah, it can be challenging, and most landlords are your mom and pop landlords who kind of just do it on the side and don't have the best communication or the best response to issues, or you have to do that, or on the flip side, you're some big corporate, renter who doesn't really care. They're just wanting that check, and the properties are okay, and but no, there's obviously really great landlords out there, but it can be challenging for sure.
um, Speaking of rentals, what advice do you have for an owner who decides they want to rent their place and move elsewhere, get a Winnebago and travel the world?
Yeah.
What are some of the tips and warnings you give to somebody? And I would say, I don't know for sure, but I think about 20% or so in our neighborhood are rentals.
Oh
Uh,
wow, that's pretty
Longtime
significant.
owners that are
Yeah.
renting. You can't tell it from because they are well kept, but
Hmm.
what are tips for owners who want to rent?
The biggest thing that I see that for non-experienced investors, landlords, are say you've been in the house for 10 years. You've had it homesteaded for 10 years and your taxes are 1,200 bucks a year, just making it up a scenario, right? When you take away your homestead from that property, the tax bill is going to get reassessed the following year, and that 1,200 might turn into 40, 4,800. And sometimes you're not prepared for that increase. It might not be 48, it might be 32 or 28, even if it's double, right? It's 2,400. Instead of paying 100 bucks a month in taxes, now you're paying $200 a month in taxes, and that would really reduce your true cash flow. A lot of investors and home buyers, for that matter, they forget about that or just don't know about that. Once it gets reassessed, your tax bill goes up. Furthermore, your tax bill then can increase up to 10% year over year. Usually it doesn't because we're not seeing the appreciation like that. It might fluctuate a point or two, maybe 3%, maximum. I say maximum, but around that range, 1 to 3% usually. But it can go up to 10%, which would actually kill all your cash flow. So
And insurance too will go up if you're going to rent it, right?
correct. You could be exactly. So that was the second thing I was going to bring up is your not only your tax bill, which you can't do anything about that, right? Same with insurance because you want to have correct liability insurance to cover if anything happened. So that would be the thing is understanding what your true costs are going to be. Your mortgage again might be 1,000 bucks a month right now, but when everything gets reassessed between your taxes and your insurance, it might be 1,500. And if you're only collecting 1,500 a month, there's no margin there. So it's like, sure, there might be, if you have a mortgage, they're paying off your mortgage, there's some tax advantages on the backside, but true cash flow is not what you might think it is because of that.
Hmm. So as we wrap up here, let's say a local person in Quail Forest or Tampa Bay would like to have you sell their house for them or help them buy a house. Or better yet, you've got somebody from New Jersey who wants to come down and wants to contact you. How can they reach you? Give us website, email, phone, carrier
Yeah,
pigeon, location,
so
whatever.
yeah, I got the pigeons outside right now. So yeah, so it's real simple. You can find me, look up my name online. I'm easy to find. All social media is the Chris Curran. My phone number is 727-560-0638. Again, 727-560-0638. A website is thechriscurran.com. So THE chriscurran.com. Website, that's my website. My email address is chris at thechriscurran.com. So try to make it as simple as possible. Social media, I'm on there as the Chris Curran. So tried to make that pretty simple. But yeah, really easy. If you just even Google my name, you'll be able to find, Chris Curran Realtor Tampa. You'll be able to get in contact with me.
And you didn't make it the real Chris Curran.
Well, I
Just the
originally
Chris
wanted just Chris Curran, but someone already owned that, so I had to go with the. Yeah.
Great. And before I let you go, um, speaking of carrier pigeons, um, I sold my carrier pigeon 27 times on eBay.
The same one.
Homing pigeon, not carrier. Homing pigeon 27 times. First time on this podcast that I've tried a joke and I've bungled it.
That's all right. Well, I always love your jokes. You always come equipped with something.
Well, this has been great, very informative, and I definitely want to have you on. Maybe we should schedule again in 6 months and see what the changes are in the climate and in the real estate climate. So thank you very much for this. So thanks, Chris, for joining me today on the Thrive Co-Living Communities podcast, Quail Forest edition. To learn more about Chris, look for his information down in the show notes below, and more about Thrive Quail Forest also down in the show notes. You can check our website out at thrivequailforest.org. So if you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and click that notification bell to catch each episode. And we'll look forward to having you back next time. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for joining us for another great episode of the Thrive Co-Living Communities YouTube podcast. To learn more about our mission and how you can support our vision of creating co-living communities worldwide, please visit us at thrivecolivingcommunities.org. To receive advanced viewings of our podcast and other exclusive content, find us on Patreon at patreon.com/Thrive Co-Living Communities. You can also learn more ways to support our mission in the show notes below. Amazon Smile, GoFundMe, Kroger, and our own Thrive Gear store, where you can buy t-shirts, hats, and many other items. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll look forward to seeing you again soon.